أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Verse 21. O the mankind, worship your Rabb, who created you and created those who came before you. By doing this, you may expect to guard yourself against evil. Now, as we have read previously in the first 20 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, that mankind was divided into three basic groups: the Allah-fearing ones, then the open deniers, and thirdly, the hypocrites. Now, in this verse, all three of them are addressed together because it says, O mankind. And the message is presented before them for which the Quran has been revealed. So everyone is addressed here by saying, Ya ayyuhan nas. And what is the message? Ubudu rabbakum. Worship your Lord. Now the Arabic word ibadah denotes spending all energies one has in total obedience to someone and shunning all disobedience out of one's awe and reverence. And Rabb is the one who gives nurture. Now, out of all the beautiful names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this name is very, very meaningful here. The word Rabb indicates that only He is or can be worthy of being worshipped, as He is the final and absolute cause of nurturing man. That who changes man through gradual stages of development from a drop of water into a healthy and rational being, and who provides the mean for his sustenance and growth. And even a man of ordinary intelligence would understand easily that such a power of nurturing can belong only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not to created beings. All created beings are dependent upon Allah. So any being that is dependent itself cannot be the nurturer of others. So it automatically follows that the act of nurturing ultimately belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So logically and rationally, this Rabb is worthy of worship. Now, as we know that this sentence is addressed to all three groups of men, but the meaning for each one of them is different. For example, for the kafirun, it gives a different meaning. It means that give up the worship of created things and turn to the ultimate creator. Now, for the hypocrites or the munafiqun, it means to purify their faith, try to give up the sinful ways, and to be perfect in obedience to Allah. And for the Allah-fearing ones, that is the muttaqun, it means that be steadfast in your worship and obedience and try to make a greater effort in the way of Allah. And the end of the verse says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Now the word لَعَلَّكُمْ is very important here. The sense it conveys is perhaps. Here it means perhaps, or you can hope to have. Now this word denotes that no human action by itself can guarantee salvation, or that salvation is a necessary reward or outcome. Even after doing good deeds, one can attain salvation only by the grace of Allah and not by the merit of one's good deeds. Now this verse teaches us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in no need of our ibadah, but it is for our own good. This way, what will we gain? Taqwa. And Allah wants to take us out of the slavery of a million gods. There's a hadith Qudsi, the gist of which is that, O son of Adam, if you worship me, that would not increase my kingdom one jot. And if you all disobey me, that would not decrease my kingdom one jot. Verse 22, it is He who made the earth a floor for you and the sky a canopy, and it is He who sends down rain from the sky for the growth of fruits for your sustenance. Therefore, Do not knowingly set up rivals to Allah. Now, this verse mentions certain favors of Allah on mankind. These favors are related to the act of nurturing. Now, these favors are pertaining to man's physical environment. Since man's being basically has two dimensions. One is the internal, or what we call anfus, and the others are external, or what we call afaq. Now, these two verses, the previous one and this one, encompass all the kinds of blessings that descend on man from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amongst the afaq, or the cosmic bounties, the first to be mentioned is the earth, which has been made a bed for man. Now, if you notice, it is neither soft and fluid like water on which one cannot settle, or hard like stone or steel that should make it difficult to be harnessed for man's purposes. But it has been given a middle state between soft and hard for man to dwell and utilize it conveniently in his daily life. And then the Arabic word firash literally means something spread out, or a bed. Now, this does not necessarily mean that the earth is not round, for the great globe of the earth, despite of being round, appears to be flat to the onlooker. And the usual way of the Quran is to describe things in an aspect which should be familiar to an average man, literate or illiterate. And the second favor mentioned is the sky, which has been made like an ornamented, beautiful ceiling. And then the third favor is water sent from the sky. The fourth bounty mentioned is the fruits which grow from this water when it goes into the earth. And the word thamarat is technically not just used for the fruits, but everything that is edible on a plant. For example, we eat the leaves of some plants like the coriander leaves or the mint leaves, or we eat the stems of some like the stems of spinach. And the word which is used exclusively for fruit is fakiha, but summer covers all of them. In short, this verse mentions 4 qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which cannot possibly be found in a created being. Having learned from these 2 verses that it is Allah and no one else who brings man into existence out of nothingness and provides the mean of his sustenance through the earth, the sky, the rains and the fruits. And one has to acknowledge that Allah and no one else is worthy of all worship and obedience. But the ultimate tragedy is to turn away from Him who made man exist and gave him the means of survival and growth, and to prostrate oneself before others who are helpless as man himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put man at the head of all his creatures so that the universe should serve him, while he should totally devote himself to the worship and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obedience to him without distraction. But there are men which, due to their ignorance and lack of understanding, forget the one Allah, and as a consequence have to serve a billion gods. So in order to rescue man from this slavery to others, the Quran says at the end of this verse, "So do not set up parallels to Allah when you know." Now this means, in other words, that once one has understood that in reality Allah alone is the creator and the provider, one will also understand that no one else can be worthy of worship and of being associated with Allah as an equal or a rival God. Now these 2 verses actually highlight the basic theme for which all the divine books and the prophets were sent. That is Tawheed, or the affirmation and the worship of one Allah. Verse 23, "If you are in doubt as to whether the revelations which we have sent to our servant are from us or not, then produce one surah like this and call to your witness besides Allah to assist you if you are right in your claim." Now we find that the two basic pillars of the guidance provided by the Quran and Tawheed, that is oneness of Allah, and secondly Risala, that is the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the two verses previous to this one, that is verse 21 and 22, gives proof for the first doctrine, and this verse and the next give argument for Risala or prophethood. Just as in the previous verses certain acts were mentioned which no one apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could conduct, like creating the earth and the sky and the regulation of the water cycle and the coming out of the fruits with the help of this water. The same way these verses refer to a kind of speech which cannot possibly be from anyone except Allah. And just as man is helpless in creating the sky, the earth, and they are acts of Allah alone, in the same way the helplessness of all created beings in the matter of producing something equal to or resembling the word of Allah is demonstrated. The verse says that if you have any doubts regarding this book, what doubts? That this is not the word of Allah, but Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has compiled it himself. Then you too bring a surah of its like. The Arabic word surah means a limited or definite piece. And as a technical term, a surah is a passage of the Quran which has been set apart from other passages by divine commandment, what we call wahi. And there are 114 surahs in the Quran. Some are long and some are very, very short. The present verse uses the word surah without any restriction, and hence it includes the shortest of the surahs in the challenge thrown out to the doubters. And then the challenge is further simplified and enhanced in strength, that in case you fail in this effort, do not give it up. And you are allowed with the facility to call to your aid any possible helper from anywhere in the world, even jinns, even angels, even your false gods, to accomplish this task. Never have we seen a simpler test than this, that you can call anyone to write down the answer. If this test was pertaining to dunya, no individual would have ever failed, but the whole world has failed in this challenge. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this challenge 5 times in the Quran. 1400 years have passed and no one has ever met this challenge. The Arabs of those days fancied themselves for their poetry and eloquence of speech, and they were so mad in hostility towards the Prophet ﷺ that this was an excellent chance for them to let the Prophet ﷺ down. Yet no one came forward to accept this challenge. Does it not argue that the Quran is not the word of man, but the word of Allah? Verse 24, but if you are unable to do so, and you can never do so, then fear the hellfire whose fuel is men and stones, which is prepared for the unbelievers. Now this verse foretells that the doubters shall never succeed. And when they have found this truth, after all the individual and collective efforts in producing a passage like this, which would resemble the Quran, then they should surrender. And if they still persist in their denial, the verse threatens them with the fires of hell. Describing this fire, the end of the verse says that the fuel of this fire will be men and stones. Why stones? So that the intensity of the heat is magnified. A stone that has been heated in the fire for a long time is more severe in heat than the actual fire. And then look at the last 2 words of the verse. Uiddat lil kafirin, was prepared for the unbelievers. Now the word uiddat is very meaningful. Although the literal meaning of this word in Arabic is prepared, but it has been derived from the root word of adad, which conveys the meaning of counted, accounted or numbered. So the sense of uiddat is something prepared with a planning by counting and numbering, like when we go for a vacation somewhere. We count the things and make preparations, like we would be needing this number of suits, this number of shoes, and this number of medicines for so many days. So this is a numbered preparation, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared it with precision and accuracy, and it will not fall short of anything that is required. Verse 25. Give glad tidings to those who believe in this book and do good deeds in accordance with its teachings, that for them there will be gardens beneath which rivers flow. Whenever they will be given fruits to eat, they will say, "This is similar to the one we used to eat before on earth." For the fruits will resemble the fruits on the earth for their easy identification and enjoyment, and for them they will be chaste virgin spouses, and they shall live therein forever. Now, after the warnings to the deniers of the Quran, a glad tiding is given to its believers. Now, these believers are not the kind whose belief is restricted to the tongue, but it is for the ones who do practical deeds to affirm this faith. Now, what is the nature of these deeds? Number one, that they are in accordance with the teachings of the Quran. And number two, they are according to the Sunnah of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, in other words, the book and the teacher both are consulted. For such people is the paradise, and the first quality mentioned of this Jannah is that rivers flow underneath it. This has two meanings. One is that to add to the beauty of this garden, waterfalls are flowing downwards in it. Or the other meaning is that its floor is like crystal of a transparent nature under which streams are flowing. Like we are told in the Quran that the floor of the palace of Sulaiman alayhi salam was transparent and there were water streams flowing under it. And whoever walked on it felt as if he was walking on water. That is why the Queen Saba picked up her dress above the ankles, thinking that she was walking on water. Then the next blessing, that the dwellers of paradise will be served with all sorts of fruits. Now these fruits will resemble the fruits of dunya, but the taste would be much more enhanced. Now one thinks that why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say this? Allah could have produced a whole new variety of fruits with different tastes, just like He has done it in this world. But this planning is done taking into consideration an important aspect of human psyche, that we are hesitant or reluctant to taste something new, something with which we are not familiar with. So, in order to remove this hesitation from the minds of the dwellers of paradise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes them look familiar to them so that they eat them without any hesitation. And then what next? Chaste spouses. Now the word azwaj is the plural of zoj, which stands for a spouse and not just a wife. In Arabic, zoj is used for both husband and wife, whereas in Urdu for husband the word zoj is used and for the wife the word zawja is used. Now, the quality most highlighted in the women of Jannah is purity. This means that these spouses will be clean externally and pure internally. That is to say, that free from everything that is physically disgusting and from everything that is morally disgusting, like bad temper or unfaithfulness. And then what else? And they shall live therein forever. Meaning that the joys of the paradise will be unlike the joys of the earth in that they will not be short-lived, nor will one have to be trembling with fear of losing them. For the believers shall live in perpetual bliss forever. Verse 26, Allah does not mind using the similitude of a mosquito or an even more insignificant creature to teach a lesson. Those who believe know that it is the truth from their Rabb. But the unbelievers say, what does Allah mean by such a similitude? By such a similitude, Allah confounds many and enlightens many. He confounds none except the transgressors. Now we find that the non-believers were given a very simple and an open challenge in the Quran, that if they do not believe that this Quran is the word of Allah, then they should bring a surah resembling the style of the Quran. And they are free to take help from any source other than Allah for this purpose. Now, as we know that the non-believers failed badly in this challenge, they were unsuccessful. So they were the ones who were proved wrong in everyone's eyes. Now, in order to remove this label from them, they started picking out faults from the Quran. Now, if we analyze this psyche, we find that when someone, due to arrogance and stubbornness, does not want to admit the superiority of a thing or the superiority or goodness of a person, they start picking out pointless and baseless allegations against him, so as to defame or devalue the thing or person whose popularity and goodness they cannot digest. Now, the non-believers, in order to reduce the effect and charisma of the Quran, started propagating that the Quran with which you are getting so impressed does not contain anything substantial. It has just ordinary and common petty examples like flies and mosquitoes. And if it had been Allah's word, then it would have contained sophisticated theories and examples. And on this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers and says that Allah does not mind using the similitude of an insect or an even more insignificant creature. Why? Because the big things are also made by Allah and the small things are also made by Allah and are His creation, and He makes no discrimination. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that we understand well with examples. The believer's heart is sensitive and it responds. A mosquito is an example of Allah's miniature art. It can see in the dark. They have heat receptors. Its whole mechanism is so complex. The believers learn from these examples, and every example guides them and becomes a source of increasing their iman. And those who believe in Allah will find Him, and those who don't will be misguided. And look at the phrase, and whatever is above it. Two meanings can be given to this. One is the little wings on the mosquito that are above it, and secondly, the little parasite-like insect that is attached to the top of the mosquito, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not feel shy or does not mind giving examples of something that is considered even smaller or insignificant than the mosquito. Wa akhiru dawana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.